That's good. That's a little more serious. I'll shut up.
Isn't it good to see Chris this morning?
Yeah.
For some of you, right? It was really good for me to see you this morning.
Actually, before you ask whatever you're gonna, can I recognize somebody who's here with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not my wife. She's with our three girls at True Life, just because they would be a handful here, and I know you guys shut down classrooms, so everybody could be in here. But Bob Deaver, would you come on up here for a second?
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, welcome, Bob.
Bob is a big part of True Life Church. He's on our governing team. He's actually officially kind of the chairman. We don't use those formal terms a lot, but we realized we needed somebody on our governing team to push us forward and make sure we're staying on task. So we unanimously voted Bob to be that guy. He's kind of our big strategist. He has disagreed with me more in the last 6 months than anybody else has in the last 6 months. And so for that reason, he's been a big support. You know how there's people in your life that come in and for that particular season, they're a huge support for that particular season? Well, Bob's been that for me the last 6 months. And he can't, he's not going to be here next week. And you guys are taking a class trip down and whatnot. So I said, why don't you join me in coming up to Relevant this Sunday? He, like me, also has 3 girls. So his wife and 3 girls are with my wife and 3 girls, and they're running the show down there at True Life. So I told Bob, if I say anything that our governing team didn't approve, he has the freedom to jump up here and be like, no, that's not true. So he might do that. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Yeah. Hey, thank you for being here, Bob. Bob drives further. It takes him longer to get to True Life than it does to get to Relevant, right, Bob?
That is true.
Yes. So if you have any
I'm
questions,
in Monmouth County.
yeah, he's in Monmouth County. So cool, buddy. Thank you for coming. Next week we really hope you're going to be at True Life next week, where you're going to get to see Chris kind of in his element with his church, preaching a sermon. We decided together to do something a little different today. And also want to let you know that we're here, and part of our time here together is for you to ask questions to any one of us regarding what you've been processing, what's on your heart, what's on your mind. Any question to Chris in the way of getting to know him a little bit better, something that you'd like to know about him, his family, his ministry, anything. It's all open, and that's kind of our forum today. All right, so let your wheels be turning. Begin to think of those questions, write them down so you can come back later and ask them. So I got a couple verses just to kind of get us started on the screen today. They have to do with kind of the theme of unity, just simple stuff, because that's part of this whole process. So go ahead, buddy. John 17, Jesus speaking, says, I am in them. And he's talking about Chris, Jeff, and I. And you are in, no, he's not referring to us. But he is, actually. It says, I am in them and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. Wow. Jesus praying to the Father that we, his disciples, would experience such perfect unity that it would be a testimony to the world that indeed God did send Jesus and that God does love his Son and loves us. That's a pretty cool statement. Pretty amazing. Next verse, sorry. Then, Paul says, he's writing to the church in Philippians, then make me truly happy, church. Hey, church, make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and one purpose. Should we just end this? Should we just end this now? These verses, this is amazing. I feel like I haven't read this yet. This is so good. Wow. Make me happy, church, Paul's saying. That's such a sincere, authentic, vulnerable letter, right? Just please make me happy by agreeing together with each other, loving, working with one mind and one purpose. Next verse, sorry. For there is one body, Paul writes to another church. We know when Paul writes to these churches, Ephesians, Philippians, he actually refers to them as one body. And there's one body, one spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. And there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, Father of all, who is over all, in all, and through all. It was like Paul just had a stream of consciousness about this body and God and us. One more verse, I think. Yeah. So how wonderful way before Paul was born, way before Jesus was physically present on earth, David, the psalmist, writes this: how wonderful and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters live together in harmony. So, thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah.
When you walked in, it just felt good. I hadn't been here last week, and so this is the second week of us talking about this. I was anxious to see all of you again, see how you're doing, and then anxious to see Chris here, but anxious in a good way, just anticipating. Chris, maybe you can start by something really simple, something I think is really important, and that is just sharing with us how you came to know Jesus and his love for you as your Savior. I feel like when I've been together in small groups of people and we want to get on mission together, that has become one of the common threads that knits our hearts kind of more than any other thing. It's like we all have fallen in love with Jesus. And I couldn't actually retell your story, but I know I've heard it. Could you tell us that story? Would that be a good starting point? Is that a good starting point? Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah. The short version of the medium, long.
They're all yours, buddy. They're all yours.
I'll do short, and then you can ask me to elaborate if there's anything you want me to elaborate on. So I grew up in a Christian home where my parents were Catholics or ex-Catholics. They grew up in the Catholic Church. They rebelled against the Catholic Church. I shouldn't say rebelled. They just realized there's something more. I'm talking about their particular Catholic churches, not knocking the whole Catholic Church as a whole.
Be careful now.
Yeah. So they kind of, through the hippie movement, they were part of a cult in Pennsylvania. That's another story, but through that...
Let's go back there? Whoa. I don't know that part of the story. We love hearing about cults in Pennsylvania. There are funny stories. Another story. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's no other way to say it. They would say it. There was a cult in Pennsylvania on some farm. They thought that if they got away from society that they could be righteous and saved. So they would read the Bible on LSD and those types of things. But eventually my father started hitchhiking around the country asking questions about Jesus. He ended up at a Bible college in Florida arguing with somebody about who Jesus is, and that night in a hotel room he opened up the scriptures and said, Lord, let this make sense to me. And that night the Holy Spirit just did something in his heart, opened his eyes. He became a born-again Christian that night. He went back to this farm cult and started telling people about it. One of the ones who believed him and said, that's Jesus, that's the truth, was my mother. She was 15, I think, at the time. And so they got married a few years later. And so growing up, they would teach us who Jesus was, very clearly. I mean, I knew who Jesus was. I could explain who Jesus was. I could explain the gospel to my friends. But Jesus wasn't my Lord. He wasn't my master. He wasn't my all in all. He was a quiz that I could get an A on. You know what I mean? I went off to the University of Miami after high school, and I remember sitting in a Bible study of sorts and listening to testimony of some athletes on the University of Miami football team, and just going, I don't know Jesus like that. Realizing I don't know Jesus like that. I had other things that were priority, girls and my pursuit of filmmaking and friends and partying and whatnot. I made a very rash decision to leave the University of Miami, drop out of college, and go out to Los Angeles to take an internship that I thought would make me the next Steven Spielberg overnight. It did anything but make me the next Steven Spielberg overnight. I was, within a few short months, I was living on a cockroach-infested floor with I was 18, my roommate was 20 years older than me. He was an ex-con. He was stealing from me. I didn't know it. I had no money, and I was and my parents would have sent me money, but I was afraid to admit, I think I made a mistake dropping out of film school in college. So I was just kind of figuring things out. I was getting all these types of tickets, I remember. And then one day I was going to court, and on my way to court, I get pulled over, and I was like, officer, I'm going to court for, a few tickets. Can you please not give me a ticket? He gave me a ticket. Not only did he give me a ticket, he made me late to that court appointment. So extra fines for that. Now I got this ticket. I had no money, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And I remember driving away, pulling over to a gas station, sitting down on like a curb and going, Jesus, I'm ready to make you the Lord of my life. I have not been a good master. I have clearly not been running my life right, and I'm just like, you know what? Everything that I've been about, Lord, I don't care anymore. It's yours. And, the song before, and Anthony, what you were sharing afterwards just hit me. Because I feel like that's what Jesus did. Like he came after me, and he came after me, and he came after me, and he was shaking up everything. He was shaking up everything. I think he put me with that ex-con just to strip me down to where I had nothing left, no forms of security but him. And I'm so grateful for that time. I am so grateful for that time. Anybody in their like late teens, early 20s, just like, man, I'm going through a similar time. Anybody here? It's like that. Oh, I'll be so grateful for this time. God is after you, and He's using this stuff. And then I started looking for a church. My mom said to me, "Why don't you look for a church?" And I grew up kind of going to church, sort of not, and I did. I started looking for a church. And I ended up at this church where this guy was one of the pastors, and this big church, and it was the first time I saw these people there who actually seemed to love Jesus and were passionate about Him, and a lot of them were my age, and a lot of them were in the arts, and I just remember going, wow, like there are people out there at churches who actually are passionate about this stuff. Like, it was so foreign to me, and so I just plugged into that community, and there I just learned to love the local church. I learned to have a passion for the local church community, and what Jesus can do through a community, because it was at that church where I learned what it meant to make Jesus the Lord of my life. I knew I wanted Him to be, but I didn't know what that looked like. I'm like, how do I navigate? Can I smoke pot still, and can I still get drunk? Like, I'm still navigating those questions, and so I had this community around me that were, what's the word, sharpening me and molding me and pointing me like, no, why don't you read this in Scripture? And so I learned to love the local church and what Jesus can do through it, through a bunch of broken, messed up people who love Jesus. Man, He can do so much, and so He does so much in my life, and so I'll end it there. Need my parents for that one.
It's good.
They're at True Life, though. You can ask them next week.
If you have a question, like, raise your hand. I'll either call on you now or later. Jane.
Yeah. So I think I know the story, but for the sake of the others that don't know, tell them how you got together with Jeff to start Relevant.
Can we go back one more step there? Can you talk about Jessica and how you met your wife? And even before that, maybe your calling to ministry.
The story of meeting me is much more interesting.
I think they know there's some sick love triangle between the two.
I think it's called bromance.
Bromance? Yeah, I haven't been able to get in.
Wait, where am I going back?
I would like to, before you go about starting Relevant, meeting Jessica or calling in ministry, because I don't know which came first.
Oh, yeah.
Ministry calling came first. So I was pursuing filmmaking, part of this church, volunteering at this church, pursuing an acting career, writing, directing. That's what I was trying to do. I guess I had been at this church about 3 years, and I was sitting in an acting class one day, and I was incredibly bored, and I was like, man, there's got to be more going on at the church that I can help with. And so I emailed this guy. Now, we knew each other. We knew that we were both from New Jersey, but it wasn't like we were close then. I knew kind of him, and he knew me, and we'd connect sometimes in the lobby. I mean,
You weren't my favorite person.
I wasn't his favorite person. So I emailed him, and I said, can we grab lunch? I just want to pick your brain. And we were sitting down at a kookaroo table. Anybody know kookaroos? No?
That's California.
Only in Cali. And I was like, so how did you end up in ministry, and how did you know your heart, you didn't want to do the acting deal? I don't know if you guys know, he was once trying to be an actor. He just kind of told me a story, and I basically said, do you ever need help up there at the office? Like, I volunteer with their creative arts ministry, and on Sundays, do you ever need help in the office? And he said, I've honestly been looking for an intern. You should have gotten the church-wide email. And I was like, I didn't get it. And he said, well...
Sent it like that week.
Yeah, and I just somehow didn't get it. And he said he was looking for an intern. He said he's been taking applications. And I remember him saying, if you want it, it's yours. And I remember driving away from the Kookaroos going, I want that. I want to do that. I had no idea what that would mean, just like filing papers. I was like, I'll do it. So I called him up or emailed him and said, I'll take it. And we got started with this internship of sorts that lasted about 18 months. And I would go up to the church office 2 or 3 days a week and just go, what do you need me to do today? And he'd be like, read this book and tell me what it's about. I'd be like, okay. I remember that was one of the assignments. Like, tell me all the pros and cons of this philosophy of small groups or something like that. And I started to just love it so much that I eventually told my agent, I had an agent, that I was going to take a break, because they would call me for an audition, and I'd be like, I don't want to go on an audition, I'm supposed to be at the church office, reading these books and stuff. And finally I told my agent, I said, I'm going to take a break, I don't know for how long, and that internship ended with Jeff's assistant stepping down to have a baby, and he said, would you want to be my assistant? And I said, yeah, I'll take it.
Hire you.
Yeah. I got fired shortly after that.
I told them last week.
Yeah, so you guys heard that then. And honestly, so I was made the small groups coordinator at this church, and that's where I thought I would be for the rest of my life. I had no desire to plant churches, no desire to be a pastor. I was on staff at this particular church, overseeing the small groups ministry. I loved that role. I loved the church. I loved LA. I honestly thought, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. This is what I'm going to do. My job was to help connect people into these small groups where they would find community and experience what I experienced from community. And I was like, you can't ask for anything more than that. That's it. That's what I wanted to do. And then God changed it. But yeah.
And I know I said it last week. So I hired Chris as my assistant. You know how sometimes you meet someone and you just say, I want this guy on the team. It doesn't matter what he does. Let's hire him. And he wasn't a good assistant, only in the sense that he's not good with details. So I would give him a stack of connection cards to cut, and I'm a perfectionist, right? So it's got to be square. And they would come back to me as like isosceles triangles. And I'd be like, dude, you shaved off the entire name phone number section. So
that's a true story. That was like one of my first tasks as his assistant, to cut these things.
Are you kidding me?
And I'm like,
it's like $100 worth of card stock. You just ruined. I'm throwing it out. So I actually created a position for Chris, because we knew we wanted to grow our small groups. The church was large, right, 3,000 people or so, but we didn't have a really strong, thriving network of small groups. And so I went to my boss, our lead pastor, and said, hey, I want this guy on my team. I need a different assistant. So I got another assistant, and we created a role for Chris. And as I mentioned, some of you weren't here last week, but in the space of a year or two, he grew the small group system from 30 or 40 groups to about 300, and it became a vital part of our church community, as you can imagine. So that's just a little backstory on that.
Chris is writing a lot of stuff on a 4-piece paper that's in the back, and I don't want to repeat everything that's on the back there, so can you fast forward? We're going to fast forward a lot. Jane, I'm even going to skip your question. It is answered in the back there, so I want you guys to read about it. But can we get into something a little bit more juicy? And that is, how does it feel to be here today?
We're skipping How I Met Jess, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll go back to that.
I told you.
Good thing she's not here.
How does it feel to be here today?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was excited to be here and connect with old faces and meet new faces. There is a little bit of intimidation, if I was honest in my heart, about this whole thing. Kind of mixed feelings.
Meaning, people here might not like you, intimidated
Intimidated by, a sense of responsibility, I guess, for. Can I ask being authentic is one of our values at True Life. I'm sure it is here. It's in our vision statement. We want to be authentic. Can I take a poll real quick? Can I do that? How many people were here when I was still here? So like you were still, raise your hands. Okay. And how many people? You guys can put them down. How many people were came after that? After we left to start True Life? Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Can we go back to the people who were here? Out of the people who were here when we left to start True Life, how many of you guys? Just be honest. No offense. Will be taken. How many of you guys felt like True Life started too soon for relevance sake? Okay, about half of the people who were here. And then out of the people who came after that and then have heard in the last few weeks that Relevant was kind of closing and doing this thing, how many of you guys felt like, what the heck, who are these people? This True Life deal? Yeah, you can get up. Honest? No, go ahead, put those hands back up. Okay, yeah, so it is knowing that there's a mix of emotions around not just what is going on here, but what has transpired in the past. There's a mix of emotions in my gut, honestly. There has been for the last 5 years since we planted True Life. I mean, I honestly believed it was God calling us to plant True Life. But after we planted True Life, I mean, like by a month, Jeff faced a major crisis in his life, and Relevant was in a had back-to-back major changes, and so there was a part of me that wrestled with feelings of guilt and what did I do? Is this a mistake? And so coming here today, not fully having closure to all those feelings. I mean, at the end of the day, I can trust God that He's sovereign over all our mistakes, and He's sovereign over things that transpire. But there's honestly still a little bit of I don't even know how I feel about that. So, who's to say? I think you even said it in one of your things, like, we don't know exactly if things are 100% the right decision sometimes. Did you say that the first week?
Yeah.
And so I'm in that boat, right? But now I'm in a position where there's a sense of responsibility. So there's a little bit of like, when these guys called me and said, hey, our team kind of voted unanimously to kind of join you guys, I was like, oh crap. Honestly,
I remember that conversation.
I was like Jeff called me and said, hey, bud, it's unanimous. And I was like, part of me was like, assuming he meant, no, we're going to stick to this. And I was like, hey, that's cool. Like, hey, it's all in God's hands. Just threw it out there. And he's like, no, and I was like, huh? Like.
And isn't that interesting that Chris thought, when Jeff said it's unanimous, he thought we were unanimously against it. Just to know that was kind of like, I think speaks to a faith-filled risk, that we believe that this has to be a God thing happening, more than our human thing happening. Because Chris was even with all the conversations we had with Chris, he wasn't even 100% sure that it was going to happen in that direction.
I didn't even know that.
I don't know if either of you guys said it. I listened to both these guys' messages, which are very interesting. They both painted me in different ways, none of which are exactly true. So I was like, who should I correct first? But I don't think either of you guys mentioned that. When I threw out in December, us joining together, that idea wasn't Relevant closing down and joining True Life. That idea was this becoming a True Life kind of campus, where there could be oversight that will help provide more momentum. I think at the time I was hearing that kids ministry wasn't consistent, and I think there was a time when the band was on a break or something. So I was like, well, maybe True Life campus, we can send some people. That was in my original head.
That's right.
So the idea of Relevant closing down and becoming part of True Life, I was against it at first. I was like, wait a second, that's a little too much. I don't know if that sounds right to me. And honestly, there was a little bit of a fleshly, because I partly felt responsible for Relevant being in a period of What's the best word, Andrew? 2013 and 14? What's the best word for the season that... What? Turmoil. I'm going with Andrew's word. No offense to everybody else, but turmoil. Andrew can be very dramatic, so that's a good word. In a good way. In a good way. Like painting a realistic picture of how things really are. So turmoil. And so there was a part of me that felt responsible for that. And so I didn't want to see, and it's partly fleshly. It's partly like, hey, relevant is not just on Jeff's resume. It's not just on Anthony's resume now. It's kind of on my resume too, so I don't want to see relevant clothes. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. Let's have True Life come in and we can help keep this thing going, in momentum and whatever. Partly because, if I was honest, partly because, yeah, it was in my flesh, I didn't want to have oh, you were part of a church plant that closed down. What's going to happen to True Life? Is that going to close down too in a few years? So those were some of the things that were swimming around in my head. So I'm kind of getting all over the place here.
No, but you did good in terms of like, yeah, we want to hear your heart. And some of what you heard from Jeff and myself were heart trying to, even some of the things we maybe misspoke or didn't say well were a result of...
And that's not to, I'm making jokes, but that's not to like, you describe Justin, you get 3 people to describe Justin, and they're all going to be different, right? Because Justin's a living being, and some people experience his silly side, and some people experience his like,
Poor Justin.
To be honest, like, I didn't know that. I'm marrying this guy Saturday?
And so a church is a living organism, It's more than an organization. It's a living organism. And so you try to explain to somebody, hey, what's going on up at this church? You're going to get, as many different sides as there are people.
Yeah.
And so, there should be different versions of what's been going on. It's not to... I make jokes.
It was the rose-colored glasses version.
Jeff made me sound like the best friend a guy could have, and I'm going to let everybody down on that one. And Anthony made me sound like this corporate, let's take over relevant guy.
Power grab.
We got a question from the audience. Melanie.
Okay, so obviously we're talking about us here, but what my question is we just found out a couple of weeks ago as a church, this merger, this corporate word we're using.
Which I don't like, by the way.
I know, but because it seems very corporate. But what I'm curious about is, when did True Life find out about the merger, and how did obviously you have more people in your body, and how was the overall kind of response, right? Just like you said, we're living beings, organisms, and we all have different opinions and feelings and emotions that come along with it, and some of us are Anthony, and some of us are post-Anthony, and same with your church, right? You have people at your church who are actually at Relevant, correct? Right? You still
correct.
have... Were you one? No, were you one of them? Oh, okay. I assume that because you said you're from Monmouth County, but you have one. So obviously, there's mixed emotions.
So give us some feedback on that. Yeah.
It's a great question.
What's your take on it? What are we coming to? What environment are you inviting us into?
It's going to be pretty hostile.
No.
It's stuff like that gets recorded, gets sent. Oh my goodness. Now we're all in the same boat. Good. That's a good question.
I care about people's emotions and feelings, so I'm just curious.
Yeah. What's your name?
I'm Melanie.
My sister-in-law, dude. Watch out.
Graham.
They're all family. That's right. We're all family.
Brother-in-law.
They're pastors, just aunts, uncles, sister-in-law's cousins.
Bob, you might want to chime into this one. Bob gets different angles from what people feel.
You're there.
So let's let him talk because we're short on time. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you or Bob. Yeah.
So, Bob, you chime in after me. What I've heard from people. Yeah, come on up here, Bob. What I've heard. First of all, people found out the same day you guys did, as a whole.
That's what I assumed.
Yeah, we made an announcement, and it was there were a lot of people who didn't come from Relevant who were kind of like, wait, does this mean we're moving to Monmouth County? Like there was quite logistical type questions. Like this didn't feel like it was clear because it just one time never is. There were a few people who came from Relevant who are excited about it. Like my wife is excited about it. You know, she's excited to see old faces and whatnot. There's others who are asking like, well, why is relevant closing? Like, what's really going on? There are some, just like there are some people here who are protective of Jeff and Anthony and saying like, you know, from what you guys told me, like, hey, you know, don't let this guy come in and boss you around. I had people at True Life saying, I know Jeff was your mentor. Don't let him come in and boss you around. You know. So it was a mix, you know. It was a mix. I think as a whole, the church is like, hey, this is good. God is doing something here. We're going to lean into this. A lot of questions, and they're still going to be asking a lot of questions, just like you guys are. But it's a mix, and that's what I've heard. Those are some of the things I've heard. What do you?
Yeah, I think you've done a pretty good job summarizing. People are excited, leaning in, but also, what does this mean, right? Why? There's questions. Why? There's how is it going to look? People not really knowing, you know, how the merge is going to look. Almost like meeting someone for the first time, right? It's like, are they going to like us? Or are we going to like them?
It's like a blind date.
It is, but I think overall there's an excitement for what God's doing. We have folks who are now, you know, kind of anticipating and preparing, saying, well, you know, how do we make this a place that is warm and welcoming so that when you do come and you're trying to understand what is it going to be like, that we're trying to anticipate and make sure that, you know, systems-wise, it's seamless transition. Chris and I were talking last week about that with kids ministry and stuff. How do we make sure that, you know, day one isn't this big long line of checking kids in, but we're doing things so that this way, as you come, it's a welcoming experience for everybody. So
That's awesome.
Yeah. Good question, Melanie. Yeah. Well, we might call you back up, Bob.
I'll sit here. I'll sit on that chair.
So part of my history with Chris, so you know, is Allison and I and Chris and Jessica, his wife, spent a little less than a week in Florida together at a conference called Exponential, which is a conference for church planters. And Allison and I had just come off of a really difficult church transition. Chris was just about to plant True Life with Jessica, and we let them know all of our challenges, successes, and failures. At that time, we were experiencing we were not at the peak of our ministry experience. We were experiencing quite a valley, and honestly, you know, Allison and I don't disclose everything to everybody all the time, but we felt really comfortable with Chris and Jess. They were a younger couple in ministry, just about to launch their first church plant. We were about, you know, 8 years into that church plant, and so that's kind of where our relationship really started. To the degree where I remember where Jeff was going through his crisis, you're like, you should call Anthony. He's been through some stuff too. And actually, Jeff and I spoke outside of the whole realm of possibility of me coming up here to Relevant in this back deck. And one of the things Jeff proposed really early on in our first conversation was the idea of perhaps me coming to Relevant and Jeff being my assistant. And I was like, what are we talking about? How can we even talk about those things? And prior to that conversation, Chris was the one who invited me to consider being a pastor at Relevant Church. Chris was actually hounding me to consider it, to the point where I had to push him back, like, that's enough. Don't ask me anymore. We're not considering it. And after I said we're not considering it, that's when we started considering it. It was really bad. So Chris has kind of been a part of our life here and there, in and out, as ministry peers. We've always liked Chris and Jessica as couples.
Thanks, buddy.
No problem. Just got to make up for the other Sunday. What else would you like to know that would be helpful to you, Ritva?
Well, I feel very confident because I've been to both churches, and I love you all guys. And anybody who is listening, I would just say, the chance.
Give it a chance. Yeah.
It's the same kind of church people upset. We've been getting the same issues. I cry easy. I have hard time talking when I'm talking. I really feel that.
Jeff, you want to hear it?
I feel that.
We want to hear you, Ritva.
Yeah.
This is good.
Thank you. I feel that God wanted me to stand up and talk. I love every one of you here. And I felt the same way about the people who went with Chris. Nothing big happened. It's like not seeing your family for a while and then getting together. And that's how I feel about Chris, the church, the people who left, and how beautifully Anthony and Jeff has taken this big step to go forward so that we can feel the same kind of love there as we have felt here. So I hope that you will make the effort to feel as loved there. You will be. I've been sitting there and it's not easy to get up and, talk in front of everybody. I haven't done that in many years. I used to do it all the time, but it was never really always easy. But I really felt God made me stand up and share my heart.
Thank you, Reba.
It's normal to use the word that Ritva just used. She used the word left. When we planted True Life, people were encouraged to be a part of that new work. And so just for some of you that weren't here, this wasn't like something Chris sprung on us and, hey, I'm out of here, here's what we're doing, relevance sucks. It was actually something I was pushing. I would bring it up every few months, like, hey, it's getting close to the time when you should be getting out of here and planting a second church, right? And you were saying, I'm not feeling that, dude. I love you so much. Right?
No, it wasn't because of that. No offense, but it was just a lot of changes for me, moving from LA to New Jersey, getting married. My mother-in-law committed suicide. My father-in-law died. There was just a lot of changes within the first year and a half of being back here. That my wife got pregnant. That I was like, dude, I can't plant a church for a while. Like, find somebody else. Like, I love the vision. I want to see this thing multiply, but I don't think I can do it. And yeah, my wife. I mean, I wrote it in that document back there, but my wife kind of was the first one to kind of start poking about it, and then we talked to Jeff, and he was, all excited about it, and our district was on board. And so I still wasn't. I was like, we went to me and my wife went to a church planners assessment, and even there I was like, hey, listen, I'm not fully on board. I'm hoping that God kind of makes this thing clear. And he did make that clear. But there were definitely times leading up to our launch. Like I remember saying to you, Jeff would stand up on a Sunday and say, who else wants to go with them? They need more people. And I remember saying to Jeff, no, like leave some people here. I don't want to take too many people from Relevant. Like that doesn't seem right. And Jeff's standing there, give them more money and send more people. And which was great. That's Jeff's heart.
In that voice.
He was very generous about it. And I was feeling like, I don't want to take people away from Relevant. And there was some moments leading up to March of 2013 when I was like, should we put this on hold? Should we just kind of wait? And we didn't, all external human signs were saying go, and so we felt like, okay.
So we had the approval of our denomination and our district, guys that have known Chris and I intimately for almost 10 years now. So again, just for those of you that weren't here, painting a picture, and from the time we first started talking about it being a reality, it was a year of us talking and planning and strategizing and having meetings. It was a year before they launched. So again, this was very planned, and we as a church family actually gave $50,000 to help plant True Life. And as Chris said, right, we were encouraging people not to leave, but just to be open to, hey, God might tap you on the shoulder and say, be a part of this. Wow, isn't that cool? So again, just helping paint a picture a little bit, that it wasn't sudden, it wasn't weird, it wasn't strained, there's no competition. It was me and us as a church family saying, we want this to be a huge success because we believe in this guy and his wife so much.
Yeah. It's not to say that Jeff and I didn't butt heads at time.
But not over the church plant, though.
No, not over the church plant. But over other things.
Yeah.
And
It's so exhausting being with these two. Let me just say.
So there were moments when I was like, Lord, I don't want to leave. Like, if I was frustrated with Jeff one day because, we planned out this sermon series, and then halfway through, he's like, no, we're going to do something different. And I'm like, what the heck? I did all this research on Revelation. And remember that series? He's like, I want to do prayer for a while. And so I remember being like, I don't want to leave. Lord, I don't want to leave. I don't want any motivation to be like, a frustration with that. And so I kept saying, Lord, like, make sure that when we leave, there's nothing like that, where there's like, oh, I'm glad to get away. No, there wasn't. In fact, after the first few years at True Life, I would say to Jeff, dude, I so took you for granted. I so took our relationship for granted. You've been the easiest person to work with, and I haven't had that for a while. So anyway, I'm all off track.
Wait, just real quick.
Melanie.
I don't know if this, because I wasn't here last week, so I'm sorry if I'm like repeating anything. But just to highlight what you were saying about, the True Life is part of the Christian Missionary Alliance, relevant and same, and that the denomination, the higher ups or what have you, was obviously aware of.
They guided us through
They
this.
guided you, and then the same is true to what's happening now.
Today.
Is that, and I don't know if everyone knows that obviously our denomination has overseen and knows about what's going on. This isn't just being done like here privately. So I think that's kind of
Sure, on August 5th, Bob Raconda will come and speak
okay.
to us too, so
everybody knows all
another
that.
Sunday that you want to be here. No, thank you, Melanie. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
Lisa.
Hi, good morning. So, obviously, lots of options on the table, folding relevant in, planting later in the future, campus approach. I love the campus approach, by the way. Can you guys walk us through why we thought that was the best approach for this body to fold in and then later come back as a campus?
Yeah. Who goes first?
And my first reaction is that might be a whole Sunday of talking us through that and really working through that. We didn't want to do a quick fix. We didn't want to put a Band-Aid on something. There are things that we struggle with here. Volunteers, children's ministry. We are thin. I use the word thin. We're not robust. Let me use another church planting word. In order to launch a Sunday morning service, in church planting we use the phrase critical mass of people. We're actually not even at the critical mass of people you need, and that people would say, okay, go launch a Sunday morning service. So we're not even at that critical mass of people in terms of people groups, children, and volunteers. So that's part of it. That's just part of it. And there's multiple layers to it. Jeff Anderson, you had your hand up. I don't know if there's something you want to add. Something.
You just have to realize too that the whole leadership team, this is something that just didn't spring up. This is something as we've been watching and maybe struggling, and you go, there's not one reason for it. Why we're facing some of these issues and the drop in attendance and stuff. And we've been praying and talking about that for over a year. So this isn't something that's a brand new thing, and it's not just Anthony and Jeff involved, but the whole leadership team. We've been in a lot of prayer, and again, everybody's been involved in this isn't something that just sprang up and came up like a thought. And this, because as you say, I think Chris said it best. The first thought was let's just get True Life to come maybe help us a little bit. That was really the whole thought all along. It's just God guided us a different direction for this for a lot of reasons. So I just didn't want you to think it was in some kind of vacuum. The leadership team has been really involved in praying over this and with the team.
Sprang up on us now.
Yes.
So let me rephrase my question a little bit. I do think it's a wonderful idea to drop back, regroup, build, and then do a satellite. I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to go through some of the future thoughts and visions of how that feels and how that looks, being able to get that critical mass and being able to disciple people and pulling in the one from here and the one from here and the one from here, getting the flock back together, and what that looks like positively in the future. That's kind of where I was going with this.
So I think we could do that in the future. I think that's something we can talk about. That's something we'll definitely address.
Maybe in 2 weeks when we're back.
Yeah,
on the 29th.
That's good, Lisa. That's very good. one of the things, let me add to that, is one of the things Chris said when I was trying to describe you all to him and our church to him. And you remember, Chris, you said, well, that sounds like a really healthy church launch team. Do you remember that?
When?
We were in your office.
Say no, Paul, just say no.
No, I don't.
Well,
If I had more context.
yeah,
I,
no, we were in your office. It was the last day. And Jeff was on the phone. He didn't
Oh, yeah.
He was in Home Depot.
I remember the
parking lot.
meeting. I don't
He was being
remember.
too stubborn to show up to our meeting.
Yeah, Jeff was.
Yeah.
These guys are being too damn much.
Yeah, and you were like, "Oh, that sounds like a really healthy church launch team." We were describing kind of the community groups and sort of the social space that we had. But it was a positive statement that he doesn't remember making about you. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are. Jeff, you said, in passing here, you weren't aware, or you didn't become aware of this till the very last minute, until when we decided to do that, and maybe we'll talk through that too, okay? Because I want to talk through those things with you. Those things are important.
Yeah.
Part of the conversation. We're not, we want to have those moments. Jane?
Yeah, I think you up there need to recognize the emotions we're going through.
Yeah.
This is really, I love Chris. I loved Chris when he was at Relevant, and I was so sad to see him go. But God's in control of that. Not us. I raised my hand. I thought it was too soon. But then again, if God showed you to go when you went, you went. I felt it personally it was too soon. Maybe a year later, but maybe the same thing would have happened. Who knows? But you have to understand our emotions, and maybe people have shared that with you. We are brokenhearted. We are brokenhearted. Many of us have given our all for this church. We love this church. We pray for this church. We pray for you guys. And we're dead. We're going to be dead in a couple of months. So we'll be reborn at another church, but we're a family that's walking into another family, a much bigger family than us, and we have to hope and pray that they accept us, not see us as interlopers and invaders. Now, we're close with each other. It's going to take us a long time to get close to your people. So this is not, I don't see this as being a walk in the park. So you need to be praying for us. There's a lot of emotions here. There's a lot of sadness. There's probably people here that are not going to move on with us. And that breaks my heart too, because they're part of our family. And now they're maybe going to feel like they need to move on and become part of another family. So really pray for us, because most of us here really need it.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Yeah, Jane, that's important to recognize. It is a death, and I know death is a negative word, and we could twist it, but I recognize that there's going to be some mourning that is needed.
There's a lot of mourning.
Grief, and that's going to be real mourning. Not a trite, superficial mourning. It's going to be some real mourning, and I recognize that as part of the reason where there's that intimidation factor of feeling like when we planted True Life, it caused that, and now this causes those feelings again. So it's heavy. Like that's a heavy. It's a heavy weight that I feel. I was praying for you guys on the way up, because I know, man, gosh, that's some tough stuff. So I want to end, whenever we do end, just by praying for you guys. Lisa, real quick, it's worth another conversation, like Anthony said, but I plan to, over the next few months, meet with other people where there's, in that lead pastor role where other churches have kind of folded in for the sake of relaunching and planting. And so there's a lot for us to learn about that. And so there's not a quick, easy answer to that. I mean, there is a vision for that happening, for us planting. Brick has the opportunity. It is a regional church in many ways, because there's people coming from Monmouth County, Ocean County, and it has the potential to launch neighborhood campuses that are really almost like real neighborhood campuses, like you had in the old days. And so what exactly that could look like, I'm a big believer in God. He gives us a vision. We ask him to make it more and more specific, and then at the same time we say, all right, Lord, if you change it though, which he's done, right? If you change this vision, then may we have the willingness to go, okay, it's not my vision, you gave it to us. So that's as quick and as thorough as an answer I could give you for now, but hopefully there'll be more.
Terry, you had a question?
Well, I just wanted to just piggyback on what Jane was saying. I think that we are all feeling our own sense of grief around all this. And I think it's just a testament to what you and Jeff have provided. And Chris, while you were here as well, because I've been here for September will make 6 years. And I've seen the church go through a lot of transition. But I do want to say to you, Chris, thank you. I've been to True Life 2 or 3 times now. And I have to say, every time I've gone, it feels like this church. I mean, I could cry because I love this church. I love everybody that comes here. Anthony, you've always said it. We're about community. So now we take this little family, and now some of us are thinking about travel, and as much as now I get it, Jeff. You were an actor, or going to be an actor. As much as he promotes Seeger, and all that. We all talk about it. It's like, oh, it's not Ocean Township, it's Bricktown. But I do want to say, from my experience going to that church, it is filled with the same authentic love. Everybody that I've met there has been gracious, and so each of us just have to just go through our own process. This will be whatever it needs to be for you. I hope that collectively we all stay together, however that looks. But I just want to say, I think what you're feeling is this sense of community that all of you have provided here. And now, So I just say next week, road trip, I'm in. Who's in? Who's in?
Thanks, Terry. Thank you.
Jane, thank you for being so raw and vulnerable and honest with us, Ritva, Melanie, everybody, Terry. We are all aware, and all in our own way, of pain, loss, confusion, just the weight that this feels. Occasionally Allison asks me, how I'm doing. I'm like, what do you mean how I'm doing? It's just a mess. I'm a mess right now. I'm a mess with all of this. And honestly, if there's one thing I'm a mess over, it's you guys.
Yeah.
I'm not a mess over the future. And I clearly do believe in this, because I am, trying to bleed for it a little bit. I believe in this. And I wouldn't partner with any other pastor other than Chris. There's not another pastor that I would hitch my wagon to. Not a single one. Maybe Rob Parker and Mama. Right, one more. Right, you agree. Rob's good, right? Yes.
He's a much better wagon.
Yeah, he's got a history. But there is not another person I would hitch you, and not only me, but you guys too. I would never. And there have been pastors who have said, hey, can we help? And I've been like, no, thank you. Great people, just not us. Not us people. And that's okay. My heart breaks for your heart breaking. My heart breaks for your heart breaking. I care about you. I am concerned for you. It hurts me to know that you're hurting. There's a counseling word for that. I love you. And so, Jane, I want you to know, we feel it. Now, there's been a different timeline for us than you all. So that might come across being a little different. So understand that on our part. Be aware. And this is why we've taken the whole summer to process this. Not just one day, not just 1 week. You can just rip the Band-Aid off, but we want to heal, we want to discover, we want to know. So that's why we asked you 2 weeks ago to trust us in the process. Be here, and thank you for being here today. didn't know. Because I show up, I wasn't here last Sunday. Like, is anyone going to be here this Sunday? Like, what's going to happen? But you proved me kind of instinctually right. Like, I know you. You know us. Like, we want to be with each other. So thank you for being here. And trusting us in the process. And we are asking that you would trust us through December in this process. We preach tribe, we preach family, we preach community, and I really want to believe the best in all of you, that you believe that. If you go choose another church and not come along on this journey with us, it won't minimize our relationship together. But I'm asking you to do the hard thing. The harder thing is to come along. The harder thing is to trust in the voyage. Jeff talked about change and how difficult that is for so many of us. So thank you for making this real again. We don't want this to be anything less than authentic, this process. If you ever catch us being inauthentic, please call us out on it. And I don't think you heard any of that today, but thank you for responding with the same depth of authenticity that we're trying to create here. So thank you. Thank you for being yourselves, being authentic, loving community. This is when our values are truly challenged.
That's true.
There's a lot of strength in this community. There are weaknesses that we have. And there are opportunities in front of us. And so we want to look to the Lord to lead us in the right way to respond to those things. So that's what we're doing together. I told you God was going to be transforming your heart, right? In these next couple of months, if you hang in there, and He's doing the work. He's doing the hard work of mourning, grieving, of losing. And I saw a picture yesterday on Instagram, Max Lucado's new book, maybe called Anxious for Nothing. Just that word just helped me. Just anxious for nothing. Thank you, brother, for coming here today. And thank you for sharing your heart with Chris.
Yeah.
Okay? I know he really wants to know that. And it's helpful for him to be here today and see that. So, thank you. Thank you, Bob, for being here too. Appreciate that. Hope this was helpful. Cool. Did you have one more thing you wanted to share before I closed? You said you want to pray for us.
I do.
Yeah.
I do want to pray.
Can we stand together?
Yeah.
Can we stand up?
Yeah, with Jeff and Anthony stepping down from their positions, it was that too it's a bold, big bold moves. I mean, you guys are taking. I said to Anthony the other day, maybe yesterday, that it feels like this part of it, this kind of closing, this dying, is largely irrelevant. And it probably feels unfair to you guys. And then the uniting part, I feel like, is largely on True Life. It's their responsibility to, make sure you guys are brought in and shepherded. And so this summer, this morning, this grief, can I just pray for you guys? Can we just bow our heads and take a moment from the things that are we're wrestling with, that we're dying to? I just want to pray for you guys. Lord Jesus, I thank you that you are truly in control. You've asked us to be faithful. You've asked us to be faithful with the decisions we have in front of us, and even when those decisions aren't crystal 100% clear, you ask us to be faithful and to do it all, acknowledging that you are Lord. And so that's what this church, Relevant Church, is doing. And with that comes so many emotions. And so I pray, in addition to being sovereign, that you would be near, that you would be the comforter that each person here needs. Anthony's comforter, Allison's comforter, Jane's comforter, Geneva's comforter, Justin's, Graham's and Melanie's and Jeff's, Andrew's and Christine's, and everybody dealing with different things, that you would comfort them in the way that they need to be comforted. Jesus, you are our sanctifier, and so you use disappointments, you use pain, you use discomfort, you use it all to mold us more and more into your image. And I ask that you would do that over these next couple months. Make each one of these beloved men and women more and more like you. You're our healer. I pray that you would heal where healing is needed. Jesus, I thank you for this community. I thank you so much for this community. I thank you for all the men and women who have just given so much, like Jane said. They're all for this community over the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. It's in your beautiful name we pray. Amen. Guys, thank you for allowing me to come. I would welcome your honest questions afterwards, or if you want to email me, I'm at chris@truelifenj.com. Thank you. I recognize, again, that this is a mix of emotions that you guys are feeling. So, I'm pretty inspired by you guys. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.